Welcome to Robot Unicorn. We are so glad that you are here. Good morning, Scott. How are you this morning?
Good morning. I'm well. And yourself?
I'm also well. It's a little chilly for me outside in our Canadian winters.
I mean, it's not bad compared to, I feel like, winters growing up.
Yeah, that's true. I guess it could be a lot snowier.
It's only -9 Celsius this morning.
Only -9.
Wow, it's not terrible.
Not my favorite. Although, you know what I told you about being in the winter?
Tell me again, because I'm sure everyone is desperate to hear what you have to say about this.
Oh, I've been telling Scott how I've been having these thoughts about winter, and it's how winter is actually this profound season where I think I used to always hate it, and I still kind of do. But I'm trying to reframe the way that I see it, where it's actually okay for our bodies to stay indoors and be cozy and have warm beverages and cozier foods and just kind of hibernate, for lack of a better word, and focus on rest and time with family in the winter. And I would keep thinking about, okay, well, maybe there's some wisdom in that instead of just comparing it to summer, because if all year long was the busyness of summer, then maybe we'd miss the time to rest. So I'm really trying to reframe winter so that we can continue to live in Canada and I can continue to be okay with the chilly winters that we have here. There's something there.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Do you wish we lived somewhere that it never got cold?
I wonder that all the time. I feel like in a way, yes, because I love the warmth. But also I do feel like there would be something I would miss about the cozy days, kind of sitting in our house and having the snowfall outside or knowing it's cold outside and you're all kind of bundled up in your sweater in the house. Like, I do feel like there's something I would miss about that if we moved away from here. Mm-hmm. But in the very same time, I could lay on a beach in the sun all year. So
That doesn't necessarily mean you're going to lay on a beach if you live somewhere warm.
No, I know, but I could go for a beach right about now. How about you? You could never go for a beach.
No. There's almost no part of me that could ever go for a beach. I don't like the feeling of sand.
Tell me you're highly sensitive without telling me you're highly sensitive.
It just gets everywhere.
Doesn't like the beach.
I don't know.
Can't deal with the texture.
I don't mind walking through it, but I hate the aftermath of it because it gets in everything. That is not relevant to today's discussion, which I think we should get to. So, over the holidays, you posted something. Apparently, it was controversial. I read through it. It didn't seem that bad to me. I mean, the comments didn't seem terrible, but you said you received a lot of DMs. So we wanted to add some more nuance to the discussion around that post.
Yeah.
So maybe to start, you can read it out.
Yeah.
And then after that, we have a gentle discussion about it.
What gentle discussion?
Yeah. I knew you would like that.
I do. Okay, here's the post. Years ago, I was in the parking lot of Shoppers Drug Mart. That's a pharmacy. A mom in the car beside me was yelling at her kids. She didn't see me getting my kids out of the van, but we could all hear her. She was yelling, calling her kids brats, and telling them to shut their mouths and listen when she went into the store. My daughter squeezed my hand tight as she heard the other mom yelling. I walked into the store with my kids. A few minutes later, I saw the mom and her kids walk into the store. The kids' eyes were red from crying, and the mom looked exhausted too. The mom had a question for the cashier at the checkout behind me. I overheard the cashier ask her, "How's your day going?" In a cheery voice, the mom said, "It's going great. The kids and I are just getting a few things and then we're going home." As soon as we were back outside, she started getting angry at her kids again. I made eye contact with her and then the kids. And then I said, "Some days are hard. They're just little." I wasn't sure what else to say. Later, I thought back to the interaction I witnessed. It struck me how the mom went from yelling when she thought no one was listening to being kind and cheery when she knew there was others around. We yell in private. Why? Because we know our kids will continue needing us, loving us, and being dependent on us. Even when we are angry in public, we can usually control our anger enough to stay calm because it's not acceptable to yell. I've thought of this interaction every time I've been tempted to yell at my kids. I try to imagine that standing in their room with me is a smiling cashier asking me how my day is. How would I respond to my kids in public? They deserve the same respect in private. I often also think of the mom who was yelling. I wish I could have talked to her, asked her what was going on in her life that was making it so hard to stay calm. I wish I could have told her she wasn't alone. Underneath her anger was probably a mom having a really hard time herself. I truly believe that no parent wants to yell at their kids. We yell because we are triggered by something our kids are doing, we don't know how else to cope with our emotions, or we desperately need support. And, as parents, it's our responsibility to learn how to cope with our anger in a different way. Yelling doesn't help our kids, and it only leads to more challenges in your home. The end.
What's the word you want to say right now?
Profound.
Yeah, there it is.
There it is. And here's why I shared that story.
Okay.
Because it's true. That story happened, and I still remember where I was standing when it all happened. And it really has stuck with me, not in a way that I thought this mom was a terrible mom, but in the way that she was able to change her demeanor and kind of control that anger as soon as she knew that the cashier was there.
Mm-hmm.
And like, who hasn't been there? I've been there. I've been there grumpy with my kids in the car. And then I get in the store, people are like, how are you? I'm like, oh, it's good. Meanwhile, you're like, I know I was just grumpy with my kids 5 minutes ago.
I mean, are you really going to share?
You're not going to share that with everyone. But it
especially some random person.
Yeah, you're not going to tell them.
Unlikely.
No, I was just yelling at my kids in the car. But it really did stick with me in the fact that when you can go from screaming and yelling and being so angry to knowing someone's watching you and kind of reining that in, it has helped me with the kids, because I feel like that's true for so many parents. How many times are we on better behavior as parents when we know someone else is there, like a friend is over?
Is that not because we're worried about getting kicked out of, let's say, the tribe, and quote unquote the tribe?
Yeah.
Because that's ingrained in humans?
Yeah, it's ingrained in who we are, right? We want to be socially accepted. But then when there isn't that other adult around or that other person who might be judging you, we can let loose and kind of let go of that, which I think is also natural. But I guess the point that I was trying to make with the post, and that I still think about, is that fair to our kids?
Right.
Right?
I think that's a fair question.
Like, you grew up and you were yelled at.
Yeah.
And your family was also...
There's a lot of arguing.
Known for arguing and like just overall kind of not being super content.
Yep.
And I'm not saying they're like that now, but that's what it was like then.
And in my specific household, it was the situation where everything outside to everyone else looked kind of nice, but internally it was a shit show.
Maybe that's part of why that shopper's story really stuck with me. Maybe without even realizing it, I was thinking a little bit about your house, where when you were out in public, it was all good and fine. And then as soon as you were alone, it was screaming and yelling and getting angry and abuse and all of those kind of things. So maybe that's why specifically that story really stuck with me, and I kind of grounded myself in it, being like, I don't want to be that parent. That's one way in public and a different way in private, right?
Yep.
Especially having a business surrounded by supporting parents. How terrible would it be if one day my kids grow up and they go public and they're like, you know what? Yeah, my mom helped everybody, but
didn't help us.
Didn't help us.
I mean, that's a pretty typical thing for a lot of...
Well, that does happen to a lot of psychologists and a lot of people who are very good at teaching this information. You talk to their kids and their kids are like, yeah, that wasn't actually what it was like in the house.
Yeah.
So I think that that's why specifically that story was so powerful for me, because I think I saw it play out in real time, and probably without even realizing it, made me think of your childhood.
That could be.
Right? And so let's talk about that. So that's your childhood.
I just want to reiterate once more, like, I'm not a yeller.
No, but people assume, I think, that you probably would be, or that yelling would be a struggle for you because of everything that you went through.
You know what? Honestly, I feel like if I wasn't with you, maybe I would have been like that. I don't know. It's hard to say, but probably more than likely would have. But because of you and being interested in and trying to tear down all the things that you were telling me originally, I feel like that's what helped. But even like when our oldest was young and she would have tantrums, I would get upset, but I would never yell at her.
So what goes through your head? So let's say our kid is having a tantrum, they're yelling and they're screaming. You're highly sensitive, like that's a lot for you. It can feel overwhelming. What are you doing in that moment to help yourself not yell and lose your cool, let your kid stay calm?
Yeah, I honestly do think about them being little. And I think the difference is much more drastic for me because I'm 6'3" or 191 centimeters and 215 pounds, like almost 100 kilograms. Like I'm a big guy. So these children are tiny compared to me.
Yeah.
Right? So what I'm typically thinking, it wouldn't be fair for me to get so enraged with them that I'd start yelling. Because they're way smaller than me. And I think you might have you've probably posted about this many times, but you one time said to me, I look at their hands and their feet.
I have a post coming out about that today, actually.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. I look at their little hands.
And that has honestly helped me. That's been a big help because, again, my hands are huge compared to theirs. So I'll hold them and hold their hand in mine, and my hand fully envelops theirs. And yeah, I think that has helped a lot. Just realizing how small they are.
Yeah.
And it's not really fair for me to be overly upset with them about things.
Yeah. I think that's such a good one. Holding their little hands when they get upset and remembering that they're little.
Yeah. Again, I want to say it is not like I don't get annoyed with them, though.
Oh, yeah.
I
Two
get grumpy
different
with
things.
them, right? Like,
That's human.
yeah.
We're going to do another episode on the annoying behaviors that toddlers do. And,
But if that's one of the main comments that people were saying, like,
Yeah.
oh, Scott's the cycle breaker and he's probably the one yelling. The reality is I don't yell. I've yelled less than I can count on one hand.
I wonder if part of you not yelling too is having that experience of being yelled at as a kid and knowing how that felt or impacted you. Do you think that makes a difference in the way that you parent?
I don't know, actually. I mean, I want to say yes, but have I, like we've talked about this on other episodes before, where I feel as though I'm willing to throw every single preconception out the window because I don't necessarily trust that what I saw was the best growing up, right? So I'm willing to throw all of that out the window if I see there's actually a better way. So in that way, I think I had this conversation with a friend too, and I said to him, it's easier for me, I think, to relearn things, mostly because I'm like, I need to start with a completely fresh slate at this point anyway.
Yeah.
So it's a lot more work maybe, but I don't know. I don't know that I like specifically thought that.
That's what I was wondering for you, like as someone who is doing things totally different, if it's like, oh, it's easy, not easier, but you've already committed to yourself, like, I don't want to do anything that I had growing up. And if you had a lot of yelling, you're like, I already know I don't want to do that. So then when the triggers come up or something like that, that's not even an option in your head.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you ask the question that way, yes. But that's because I wanted to throw everything out the window.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's not to say I had ideas. So even the idea of like punishing children for doing wrong things, that made sense to me. So then I was going to continue with that. But that didn't mean I was going to spank like I was spanked. But I thought, oh, timeouts probably are good and all these different things. But you changed my mind on that. You helped me understand that actually wasn't the best way to help kids.
Yeah.
Without really thinking about it, yes, I thought about the fact that I didn't want to yell.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think about the parent who's listening to this and being like, okay, great for you guys. You both are not yellers.
Yeah.
Right?
We also keep each other accountable. Like I will keep you accountable and you do the same for me.
Yeah. So one thing that we do is if either of us looks like they're going to lose their cool, and like, I think that there's like a spectrum of losing your cool. So maybe we don't yell, but like we both said, we definitely both get grumpy and irritated with the kids and maybe don't talk the way that we want to talk. Right. Even this morning I can't remember what was going on, but like 2 kids were on my lap and they're all climbing all over me. And I was getting very highly irritated by the situation. I get very annoyed when they're like climbing on me. And then all of a sudden the one kid elbows me in the stomach and I just like, stop it. You know, not a yelling, but just like, stop, get off me, guys. I'm done. And I remember you just kind of looked over. You're like, Jess. I'm like, yeah, okay. You're right. They're just little. I have to set the boundary that they have to get off me.
They just love you so much that they want to climb all over you.
So we will hold each other accountable for the way that we talk to the kids.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it's in the moment and sometimes it is saying something like, they're just little, right? Like they're just little. Yep. They're having a hard time. Sometimes it's swapping off. There's been times where, let's say, you've been really irritated by the kids and I can tell, and then I'm getting irritated by you because you're irritated by the kids. So I'm like, Scott, just go downstairs. I got this.
Yeah.
And you'll just go downstairs for a little while.
Yeah, we'll do that for each other. Let's say if at bedtime it's like the kids are just not listening and not doing what we're saying and we're getting irritated, it usually doesn't make it better. It typically doesn't make the kids do the thing that we want them to do if we're irritated with them.
Yeah.
So then we often will swap off, and that seems to help.
That definitely seems to help. So I think if you have a partner, someone that you're co-parenting with, having a word or like something that you do to help you kind of swap off if you feel like you're going to lose your cool, that can be really helpful. And talking about that when you're both calm so that you know that you're open to like to the support remember talking to a friend about this once, and she was like, I just felt that if I was the one starting, her son was having huge tantrums, huge meltdowns. If I was the one helping him, that I couldn't leave. So then I would stay with him and he's having the huge meltdown. And then I start to get very agitated in my own body and I start to feel like I'm going to yell, but I feel like I have to stay. And then eventually I yell and then it just gets worse. And I was like, okay, well, what if you didn't stay? What if you swapped out? She was like, yeah, I guess that's a good idea. So she started swapping out and all of a sudden then her and her husband could both keep their cool, right?
Yep.
So I think that's a really good thing to help with yelling. Something that I find helpful, you talked about their littleness, is imagining that their yells just kind of bounce off me. Like, I love a visualization.
Yeah.
So
That doesn't work for me.
no,
But
I figured it wouldn't. But for a lot of parents, I think it does help. Like imagining that their yells are coming at you. You just have some kind of reflective shield and the shield, it's just like bouncing off you. I find that helpful, especially as someone who is deeply compassionate, like you said, and empathetic. I feel like I can take a lot of things to heart and it can feel like personally offensive or overwhelming or overstimulating. And so when I just imagine the yells are just bouncing off me.
do you really take personal offense to anything the kids do?
Not anymore, but I feel like I used to.
You used to take personal offense?
Or like, okay, personal offense might not be the best word, but I used to feel like, this is not a metaphor, but I'll go here. I used to feel like if our toddler, our oldest, was having a tantrum, it was like a fire that I had to put out, and I was the firefighter, and I had to get that fire out as soon as humanly possible. And so when she started like being on fire, having these tantrums, I would feel like I need to do whatever I can to get this to stop, right? And so her yells and her cries, maybe they wouldn't be like personally offensive, but I feel like they'd have to be this like very, very quick call to action, like distract her, get her food, do this, do that. And like it would make my body move so fast that I would end up joining into her chaos and have a hard time staying calm, right? So now when I just imagine that I can be slow in my movements to them if they're having a tantrum.
Yeah, that doesn't really sound like offense though. Like you're not taking offense to what they're saying. That's more like they're trying to hurt your feelings, in my opinion.
Oh, yeah. No, not that they're trying to hurt my feelings, but more like...
It's your duty to make sure it ends. Yeah, I get that.
Yeah, so then you're on high alert trying to stop that tantrum. But now I move a lot slower. I just sit next to them for a little bit. I take my time. I just imagine the...
I would say I struggle with that still.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. Yeah, you might still be in kind of that firefighter mode sometimes.
Yeah. I feel like because of how I grew up, I always was planning things out and trying to fix problems in my life. And so that's likely why I feel the need, the compulsion almost to fix.
When so often the answer to our kids' problems isn't fixing it, it's just being there.
It doesn't actually, that would be fixing it. And I think I am getting better at it, but it is a compulsion for me to want to fix their tantrums or fix their sadness.
Yeah, exactly. So that helps me. Just imagining that they're bouncing off me. I don't need to be the firefighter. I could just come in and just sit next to them. And yeah, sure, maybe they still need like a snack or they still need to go to bed, but I don't have to be so quick.
Yeah.
That helps me a lot.
Well, and even like this past week, our one daughter was sleepwalking, ended up sleepwalking into the bathroom, sitting on the toilet. That's where I found her and I had to like hold her up because she was sleeping. And she was peeing, and I only realized after that she still had her pants on and was peeing through her pants. It was the cutest thing because she's so little, and she was fully asleep, didn't even remember it the next day. But those kind of things help me realize that they're still so little. They're still so innocent, and any anger or annoyance I have with them is likely kind of unwarranted.
Yeah. There's something really helpful that a follower actually told us at our Vancouver meetup. And she said in her head, she always differentiates between this is my child and this is 3. And she said it really would help. Like sometimes her child would be screaming and yelling and having a major tantrum. She'd be like, this is 3. Like this is my kid just being 3 years old.
Yep.
This is what 3-year-olds are meant to do. There's nothing wrong with my kid. And this won't be their personality forever, At 3, my job is just to help them through it. And then when their child is their most calm, most centered kind of version of themselves, like, this is my child's truest self. Like, this is actually them. I'm seeing little glimpses of them, but I can't base who I believe they are on the way that they act when they're 3.
Yeah.
And I've been finding that helpful, even with our own kids. I'm like, oh, she's 2. So she's just being 2 right now. And then when she's being her most rested, satiated version of herself. Like, okay, I'm seeing little glimpses of who you're going to become.
Yeah.
And that's this person right now.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's a little bit simplified, but I get what you're saying.
Sometimes the simplified tools, though, maybe not for you, but for a lot of people are very helpful.
Yeah, but then you get a post like this and people get upset and it's simplified. It's not, right? So
True. So in terms of cycle breaking, right? So people are asking me a lot about, well, we want to hear from Scott because he's the actual cycle breaker. It's all easy for you because you had parents who accepted your feelings. And a side note on that is it's not always easy for me. I still am tired. I still get dysregulated. I still lose my cool, but it is easier because I don't have to go through all these obstacles to be calm, right? Like the roots of calmness are there. So for you, as someone who the roots of calmness are not necessarily there, what has helped you the most or things that have helped you the most in your healing journey to kind of get to the parent that you are today?
Visualizing who I would ideally like to be as a parent, I think is the biggest one. And I think it helps because I have you, I'm married to you. So then I get to see a lot of the ways you react. And then also me being competitive, I will read up on like parenting methods and then try and one up you a little bit in certain situations. Be like, see, I did it right, Jess. But I would say the biggest thing is visualizing the parent that I want to be and understanding that, of course, it's not always going to be, I don't know, this feels like the most cliche or broken record type thing to say, but it's not always going to be easy. And it's not possible to always be that ideal type of parent. But if I'm constantly visualizing this is the parent I want to be and making steps towards that, it'll just become easier over time. And especially as they get older too, I don't know, I've found it to be easier as they all get older.
Yeah, when you're not in the thick of postpartum and you know, all those sleepless nights and stuff like that, it definitely is easier too. That's an exercise actually we have in our Parenting Little Kids course is visualizing the parent that you want to be.
Oh, really?
Because I think so many parents say, well, I've always yelled, so I'm just going to be a yelling parent, you know, or my dad yelled and my mom yelled, so I just feel like that's all I can ever be. And we get stuck on this current vision of what we believe to be true about ourselves and what we believe that we can't change. And so in the course, I get parents to think about 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, and then even 30 years down the road. Imagine yourself and imagine yourself with your kids and imagine what you want your kids to say about who you were as a parent. Write that down, right? Like write down 3 words that you want your kids to someday say when they look back about their childhood. Who were you to them? And then focus on that. Like even put those 3 words on your fridge and remind yourself every day. You know, I want my kids to someday say, I was curious with them. I was kind. I was compassionate. Or I was silly. Or I was whatever it is that you want. Yeah. I was funnier than dad, you know? We're always fighting about who's funnier.
Yeah.
But write down those words, have them on your fridge, look at them every single day, and try and start to imagine that just because you were yelled at as a kid, it doesn't mean that you're going to necessarily repeat that cycle. But if we have this self-fulfilling prophecy of, well, our parents yelled and my grandparents yelled, everyone was a yeller, so I'm going to be a yeller, that is likely going to come true, right? So we want to have a different vision in our minds. So actually the fact that you said that is quite funny because that is one of my favorite exercises in the entire Parenting Little Kids course is just that envisioning of something different. The other thing I was going to say for you and for everyone is I think that there's 2 reasons why we usually get really triggered by something. And so the one reason is like it reminds us of an old wound or of something that we weren't allowed to express when we were kids or something that we would have been yelled at for when we were kids. And the other reason that we get really triggered and yell a lot is we're just dysregulated.
Yeah.
Like we're hungry, we're tired. It's a sensory nightmare in our house. Things are messy and cluttered, or we're already dysregulated because there's stress at work or stress somewhere else, right? And so a lot of people will say, wait, I'm not a cycle breaker, but I still yell all the time. So then maybe tune in with the dysregulated part. You know, what's making you so dysregulated?
Yep. Now, do you think it's a little bit easier for me only because we have 3 daughters? So I don't have a son. I don't know. It's hard for me to say, but I would imagine if what you're saying is true, then if we were to have had a son, it might have been more triggering for me. And maybe some of those traits would have come out more or it might have been more likely for them to come out.
Yes. I totally wonder that a lot because
is that
we don't have
actually a research thing though? Like, is that
I mean, I don't know about what the research says on that, but what I do know from just my clinical practice is that often when you have a child same gender as you and going through the same types of things that you used to go through, so even like our daughter and her friendship struggles right now, like that triggers a lot in me. So when you have a child the same age as you going through the same things will be triggered up. And so
Yeah,
whether
that's fair. Because her friendship related, like the things that she talks about related to friendship, they're not things that I can relate to really from growing up. So then,
so you don't know how the
I can see
loneliness
that.
feels. You don't know how whatever the struggles are in friendship feels. So you're not so triggered by it because it doesn't bring up an emotion or a feeling in you.
No, because I
right?
feel like for me at least, boys growing up, if you were mad at each other, you would just fight on the playground.
Right.
And then you'd kind of be done with it. But it seems like that's not quite the same as what our oldest daughter, now being a little bit older,
Goes through.
Yeah.
So if you had a boy that was fighting on the playground, maybe that would bring up feelings in you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, possibly.
And I do think that sometimes our children trigger our own insecurities. So if there's certain things that you are insecure about or hadn't healed or hadn't thought about yet, like that might be brought up in you and your own child, right? So it is important to think about the stories that you're telling yourself about your children's behavior, because sometimes that is why we yell or we get angry, right? Because you and I, when we see our kids, like the friendship struggle, right? I have a story in my head of like, this is going to be terrible. She's going to hate grade school. It's going to be awful. She's going to be lonely. She's going to feel like no one likes her. She's going to feel unlovable, like all those things that I felt. Whereas you don't have that story because that didn't happen to you in the same way.
Yeah, I mean, I was not popular, that's for sure. And especially in grade school.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a completely different set of struggles that she faces compared to what I did. So it's not like in my mind I'm telling myself a story similar to what I grew up with for her, because I just don't think that that's how it's going to be for her.
Yeah. So if you could give a word of advice or encouragement to a cycle breaking parent who is struggling with yelling, wants to do things different, doesn't know where to start, what kind of advice might you?
Well, I can only speak from my own experience, but I think the biggest thing is, well, two things like we already talked about. One is visualizing who I want to be as a parent. I think that has helped a lot. So for instance, let's say in terms of yelling, like that was never really a question in my mind that I was going to yell. I knew that I was definitely not going to spank or anything like that. And I've tried to remain open-minded about like what works best, and especially what works best for building the relationship with our daughters. And then I think in the times where I'm inclined to be annoyed or grumpy with them, I am, especially lately, just looking at their hands, their little hands, and holding their hands in mine. And then, I don't know, for whatever reason, especially the past like 6 months, I've found that I just look at them like our 2-year-old during her tantrums and just think she's the cutest thing ever.
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, this is the biggest thing in the world for you right now. And it's very cute to me. Those are the main things.
Yeah. I think those are good things. And I think for any parent who's stuck in yelling, and just be mindful of the label that you put on yourself, right? I think sometimes we can just write ourselves off, be like, well, I'm a yeller, just like my mom, just like my dad. And
Is that a thing that people do?
yeah, I've heard that from a lot of people. And even like in defending, they're yelling, right? Well, it's just how I am. That's how my whole family is. We're all yellers.
Yeah.
Right? I've heard
To me, that's just an excuse. Like, truthfully, you shouldn't be yelling at children. They're so much smaller than you. I don't know. It seems like an unfair advantage for a parent to do that.
Yeah.
It's like a lot of things. It's unfair advantage for parents to think that spanking or yelling is okay. And maybe it's easier for me to say that because I'm so much bigger than them, because I'm a big guy. It's easier for me to think that way. But yeah, I feel like it's an unfair advantage. And if that's the case, then you should be prepared. Like me as a child, I would have fought back.
Yeah. And then we see more power struggles, and then parents get angrier.
Then you should expect that, I think, because it's only fair.
And I call that the punishment cycle, right? Like we yell at our kid to punish them, or we spank them, we send them to timeout. Okay, well now they learn I'm bad or whatever, and now there's a power struggle, so now they do something else to get them in trouble, and then we punish them again, and blah, 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 blah. Like it just keeps going on. So you want to start a new cycle, right? So I think both are true. Like we want to give the message that yelling at your kids is not going to be productive for you. It's not going to set up the relationship that you want for your children. And you're probably still going to yell at your kids sometimes, right? Good parents sometimes lose their cool. Like that's just a fact. That happens. You're going to be human.
Yeah.
So when that does happen, remember their littleness after. Let that guilt that you feel, don't beat yourself up forever about it, but be like, guilt tells me that I acted in a way that doesn't align with my values. And when that happens, it's a messenger. Let's think about the guilt and not just be like moms or dads can't ever feel guilt. Guilt actually can be helpful to us.
Yeah.
We should feel guilt sometimes. Guilt can be a helpful thing. So let's take the guilt that we feel and be like, I'm going to go apologize to my child. I'm not going to let them just assume that I'm happy with them because
that's the concept of
an
repair,
hour has
right?
passed. Yeah, and repair is one of the most profound, truly, things that we can do with our kids. And times when I have lost my cool, I know I lost my cool probably the most 2 different seasons of my life. One, when you were traveling all the time and I was alone with a toddler trying to work and take care of her. 2, after we had our 3rd baby and life was a hot mess. I repaired so often during those seasons. And sometimes that's what you have to do. You just go back, you apologize, you say sorry, and you keep trying to better yourself so that eventually you're not yelling so much. So I want to leave parents with that too, right? Like repair is powerful. It shows kids even how to apologize when they make mistakes too. And it's okay for them to know that you're human. And I think about you as a child and so many kids who probably didn't hear I'm sorry after being yelled at and how impactful that would have been.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think that's kind of a nice message to leave people with.
Yep, definitely.
Give yourself a hug and know that we're proud of you for trying to break the cycle if that's you. And if you're more like me, who you still lose your cool, but you maybe you didn't go through the trauma, but you're still losing your cool sometimes, like I see you too. And parenting is hard and they are little. Just like I said in the post, both things are true.
I don't think life was meant to be easy. So
yeah,
parenting is kind of a big part of life. There's a lot of parents in the world.
Yeah. So thanks for listening. I hope you found it helpful. Please let us know. And we can always do more on yelling if you want us to circle back to this topic. Hey friends, thank you so much for listening to today's episode. We are glad that you are here. If you enjoyed today's episode and found it interesting, we'd really appreciate it if you'd leave a rating and a review. Scott and I actually sit down together and read them all. A 5-star rating helps us share our podcast and get these important messages out there. Thank you so much for listening, and we can't wait to talk to you again next time.